Please welcome to the stage the ever-driven Karla Briones.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, so I'm gonna start this here just to kind of see it. Thank you. All right. Oh my God, that's a big picture of me there. Okay, so I want to start by saying that a lot of people look at life through different shades of colors, and I can imagine that many of you look at life that way in here. Other people may look at life through musical notes, you know, my musicians and people that are inspired by music. I look at life through business. And it all started with candy. When I was in grade 1, six years old, my parents gave my brothers and I a challenge that if we got straight A's for an entire year, they would bring us to Disneyland. And I mean, what little girl doesn't want to go and meet her favorite princess, right? So we did. After an entire year of working really hard, my brothers and I went to Disneyland. Or, well, we got the straight A's to go to Disneyland. And my parents, the first reaction was like, oh shit, right? Now we have to deliver. We never lived in opulence, never lacked food on the table or a roof over our shoulders. But it was a stretch for my parents to bring 3 kids to Disneyland. So they told us that they would cover most of the expenses, but that we needed to come up with our spending money for, you know, souvenirs, chocolate bars, and the priorities a 6-year-old can have. So it all started with candy then, my entrepreneurial life. I asked my dad for $10 or the equivalent of $10. I went to my local candy store as a 6-year-old kid and started reselling the candy in my school backyard. And it was awesome. I was able to pay my dad back because my business was thriving. There came a point where I actually had to hire some of my classmates. So I was giving them commission, and I had my candy empire. Like I was the queen of candy in my backyard or in my school backyard. And then one day, my parents get a call from the school principal. And the school principal mandated my parents that I should shut down my operations because the cafeteria lady was complaining that I was taking way too much business away from her. And first, my parents gave a high five, kind of like silently. And then they said, Karla, you know, I think you're taking too much business. So that was my first experience with entrepreneurship. I loved it. I loved the challenge. I love being able to work with my peers as well. And the results were that I got to meet Mickey himself. That's my mom and my 2 brothers and I in front of It's a Small World. And it was awesome. It was an awesome experience because also, if you see, my uterus is expanding right now because this is my daughter. And I love her so much. So my uterus is going, oh my gosh, she's so beautiful. But anyways, so I can say that entrepreneurship is contagious because this is the report card from my daughter last year. Carmen would be more focused and create less distractions if she did not bring toys from home to sell to her peers. This is last year. So anyways, I also gave a high five to my daughter because I had given the same challenge. I will take you to Disney World, but you have to come up with your own spending money. And she did. So, and then I got in trouble for it. But anyways, all this experience basically taught me that no matter what, I could do it. Even if I was a 6-year-old, my daughter could do it as a little girl, that if there was a problem, I had the creativity to come up with a solution for it. Now, I want to talk about endurance today. So my name is Karla Briones, a local entrepreneur with ADHD. And I want to share my story about endurance and share that endurance is way more than just hustling and working hard. It's way more than that. I grew up in Chihuahua, Mexico. I was born there. So I have a map over here. You know, if you've been to Cancun, Cancun is right down here with the margarita. And then my hometown is way up in the north, bordering with Texas. And then, you know, Ottawa is way up there. So that's where I'm from, just so that you know where it is in the map. Yes, that is where the little dog comes from, Chihuahua. So just in case you were wondering, a lot of people ask me about that. And I grew up in Chihuahua, the north of Mexico. in a family of entrepreneurs. My dad is a retired now veterinarian doctor, but ever since I was a little girl, I remember going to, the farms with cows. I grew up watching my dad perform surgeries to countless of dogs, and my mom and my dad were always the team. Now, growing up in the north of Mexico in the late 90s, that's when a lot of the drug cartel wars started to happen. So all of the stuff that you watch on Netflix now, that was my reality. I lost a lot of friends of mine. I lost a lot of acquaintances and family members because of the war between drug cartels. And it wasn't a safe place for us to be as a family. I was 18 years old when my parents decided to leave everything and come to Canada, because Canada seemed to be a safer country. We had absolutely no family members in Canada, no friends, no nobody. We just wanted to skip the States just because there was a lot of racism against Mexicans, sometimes could continue to be. So Canada became the place. So we actually drove in that U-Haul. We sold everything we had, and whatever we got left over, we loaded up that U-Haul, and we made the 3,776 kilometers trek to Ottawa. So it was 5 days, and it was an exciting time for me as a teenager. I was 18. My parents, by the way, they were 48 and 45. I'm 43 right now. No, I'm 44. Woo. I'm 44, and I couldn't imagine, doing what my parents did for us. So I'm forever grateful for them. We lived your typical immigrant experience here in Canada. Those are my parents. My dad is a medical profession. He wasn't able to practice here in Canada. So he started selling gas contracts from door to door, then insurance. My mom started cleaning homes. I was working 3 part-time jobs to help put food on the table as well. But then I also decided to go to university in journalism. I spoke no English, guys. I don't know what I was thinking. It was a really, really, really tough first year. I actually didn't make it into second year. I think I missed my mark by about a point. But I remember going into women's studies, or having a women's studies class, which for me as a Mexican kid in the late 90s, a women's studies was something that I was like, what the hell is women's studies? And then that's when I started discovering feminism and women's rights and all of these things that were completely new for me. So I actually excelled at this class, and I got an A-. When I got the letter saying that I didn't make it to second year, I realized I need to talk to my professor for women's studies and ask her and advocate for myself to see if she could bump it to an A so that I can make second year of university. And thankfully, she did. And that taught me a huge lesson right there. It was how important it is to work hard, but also how important it is to recognize those people around you that have influence and then speak up with them and self-advocate for what you really want. It was a huge learning experience that actually pulled me out of many, many situations in the future. So I ended up actually graduating, and I was the first woman on my mom's side to graduate from a university, which was huge. There's no way I would have been able to do this had I stayed in the line of fire that we were living in Mexico. Yay! Thank you. Again, very grateful for my parents. Eventually, and I'm going to be skipping a lot of hardship, but my parents also ended up opening their own animal practice, a veterinary animal hospital on Montreal Road in Ottawa. So my dad ended up recertifying after failing his tests 4 times. And my mom ended up going back to school to become a lab technician. And they became the team, right? So my dad was managing, the small animal practice. My mom was managing the lab. And it was a really exciting time in our life, like as immigrants. We made it, right? Like finally, after all these many years, my parents made it. And if you've ever been around entrepreneurs, for the entrepreneurs in the room, and if you've ever spoken to an entrepreneur, entrepreneurship is contagious. We love to talk about, our ideas. We love to talk to people with other ideas. And it's another form of creativity. That's how I see it, right? Like it's creative, it's contagious, it's vibrant, it's dynamic. And I got the bug. So after I graduated from university, I went and worked as a public relations consultant in Toronto, and I was living the high life. I thought that I had made it, right? But then I got this dog, Pepe, a giant schnauzer. He's the dog of my life, by the way. He's no longer with us, unfortunately, but this dog literally changed my life. And I remember thinking, oh, it would be so cool if I could come to work with my dog. And then, oh my God, it would be so cool if I could do something with my dog. And then I'm like, oh my God, all I want to do is to open up a pet store. And I was afraid what my parents would think of this, right? Because they've given up so much for me. I went to this huge university and I graduated from journalism. And then I'm going to tell my parents that all I want to do is to open up a pet store. So I had this conversation with them, and their answer was, so why don't you? And I think that was pivotal. That answer changed the course of my life, because it not only did I know that I wasn't, that my parents were not pissed off at me, that I wasn't, failing or letting them down, but it actually made me realize, yeah, what's stopping me from doing it? So as an entrepreneur, when I decided to say, okay, you know what? I'm quitting my job and I'm going full tilt in this. Well, it wasn't easy. I was 28 years old. I was also a new mom. And it was the recession of '08, if anybody remembers that, the tech recession, which was pretty bad here in Canada. Nobody was lending money. I had no experience as a business owner. I had no experience in a pet store. All I had was a lot of passion. I really believed that I could make this work. I was also very naive, thankfully, because if I had known then what I know now, I don't know if I actually would have, gotten the guts to do it. And I was also crazy, right? How am I going to move from Toronto to Ottawa with a newborn, work on a business plan, and trying to beg, borrow, and steal in order to afford opening a pet food store? So again, naive and crazy at the same time. But eventually, I did. That's Pepe there. That was the first day that we went to work together. Opened up Global Pet Foods Canada. And then a year later, it was crazy, remember, with my kid over there. And I believe I was pregnant with my second one in that picture. Opened up Global Pet Foods here in Hintonburg, over here, which are still, both of them are still in operations. You may see, by the way, this picture with a whole bunch of products. I actually got really creative. I didn't have money to stock the store. So I borrow from the other store, and what you see are only bags of everything. So there is no bags behind those bags. There's just one of everything to make it look like it was a fully stocked store. So we got really, really creative on how to make this work. And then again, as a new mom, you see that I was, working with my kid in the front. My kids ended up sleeping on dog beds all the time. There was free labor too over here, teaching them young. Inventory nights, kids that are, sick and can't go to school, but I have to bring them to work. And from the pictures here, it's really funny, because from the pictures here, you can say, wow, she's made it, right? Instagram versus reality. However, things were really tough, really, really tough financially. Things were not really where we needed to be. There were a lot of sleepless nights. As a mom as well, as an entrepreneur, an immigrant with a very small network. And it's very isolating for people that are in business. You know how business could be isolating. If you're an immigrant and you're fairly new to Canada, it can be also isolating. So I was struggling in many ways. And in that moment, I recognized that I was working hard, but maybe I was not working smart, because if I go back to my university lesson, I wasn't working with those with influence. I failed to recognize those with influence that could potentially help, that I could potentially work together with for something greater that could benefit me financially, but also the community. And that's when I started getting creative. It's like, okay, things are not doing well. I'm working hard, but how can I reach out to other people to help, improve my situation and maybe my community's situation. And that's when I realized that I needed to do something different if I wanted different results. So I partnered with Sandy Sharkey, which is a local media personality and a photographer, and she's very passionate about animals too. I didn't know her, by the way. I reached out and I was like, oh my God, maybe she's gonna turn me down. And I'm like, would you be interested in creating this gallery of pictures of people that live on the streets or are under house, so homeless people or under house people, who love their animals and that their animals are their lifelines, and create a beautiful gallery in support of an animal organization. And she said yes. And we've never met. She didn't know who I was, but she loved the idea. And we ended up creating this beautiful, beautiful gallery of incredible images where you can really see the bond between owners and animals, regardless of, economic situations, regardless of anything, the love is palpable. We invited the people to the gallery exhibit. And the really cool thing that ended up happening, was that I learned that doing good is good for business and for the community and humanity and. Why? Because we were able to raise $25,000 for this animal organization. We were able to house a big chunk of the people that we took pictures of, because they were able to get notoriety, and then people from the community and caseworkers said, why are you receiving any help? No, we're not. Let's get you in the system. So they were able to find homes, and my business ended up actually increasing its sales because it all of a sudden got itself attached to the community that we were helping. So people really got behind us, and our business increased, which was a really cool way to learn that doing good is actually good for business. But then, fast forward, and I got cocky. Right? Because business was doing well. I had a really strong team. I had developed the systems that everybody tells you to develop. And, the business was on autopilot, and I wasn't needed in the operations or in the business, which is probably every entrepreneur's dream, right? I got bored because all of a sudden I wasn't needed, in my shops, because I had created the systems so well that there was no room for me anymore. So I got cocky. I'm like, I have all this free time. I'm a successful entrepreneur, but I'm bored. So I need to come up with something. As you remember, creativity, ADHD, and business. So I got bored and decided to ask myself, you know what? I think that there isn't anything in Ottawa back in the day that offers healthy fast food for people. So I started looking at different franchises, and I said, well, why don't I, right? But that why don't I was egocentric, was based on ego, and it wasn't based on true passion, as I had before when I was talking to my parents. So I learned very quickly that ego is not good for business. I opened Freshie in Westboro in 2016, and I was, again, very cocky, it was ego-based, ego-driven. I'm getting very vulnerable here. And I just loved the high that I would get for being perceived as a successful entrepreneur. And yes, business was doing great, but then guess what? COVID happened, right? And overnight, I lost about 90% of my business. And then my ego obviously got very bruised. And I went through a lot of hardships, and I think everybody, we didn't know what was happening. We didn't know where the future was going to take us. So I went back to the roots. I went back to the roots of, okay, people are asking me how they can help me. My brother works in the healthcare industry. I see that he's overworked, and my business is failing. So how can I put two and two together? So we created a campaign where people who were asking me how they could help me, I said, well, you can give me $10. And then in return, those $10, we're going to donate meals to healthcare workers all around Ottawa. And we did. So we ended up doing this. And it was a way to sustain our business, a way to give people an opportunity to help, and a way to feed our healthcare workers that were overworked. We delivered over 5,000 meals in a 3-month span. And it was probably one of the most exciting parts of my Freshie experience. Why? Because it was working with community. It was working together for something good. This is a really cool picture. I'm not sure if you can see it, but that's part of a ventilator up there. And this is from a doctor who, the note is here, who was trying to figure out how to work old ventilators because they didn't have enough in the ICU, with a picture of our reps and saying thank you. So to me, that was incredibly rewarding. And it brought me back to the roots of how important it is to work with the community as opposed to run your business ego-based and ego-driven. And I guess this picture really exemplifies the end of the Freshie chapter. I did end up closing it last year. But I was stressed, I was tired, I was deflated. However, if my business goes under, it will go under having done something good for the community. And I think that's the biggest lesson that I learned, and that was my biggest learning with Freshie, is that I couldn't continue driving my entrepreneurial journey based on ego, and that I needed to go back to community building. That's where I really, really excel at. So enduring in life is not necessarily just working hard and enduring. Sometimes it's also making hard decisions and shedding what doesn't serve to make room for what does. Now, it was interesting during this time, during the pandemic, because as I was going through all of this and as I was documenting everything that was happening with the deliveries to the hospitals and whatnot on my social media, I started to realize that I was working hard, but instead of recognizing those with influence, I really started to realize that I had influence too. And it was a revelation for me, because sometimes I would say something on my socials or say something to my peers or say something to other people around me. And I was identifying a problem, but also saying, wouldn't it be better if we did it this way? And people listened, and I'm like, oh my God, what's going on? Like that, okay, so I have influence. And it was really humbling. And I tried to check my ego, right? Because lesson learned. And then I'm like, maybe I can use my voice. Maybe I can use my own influence to advocate and work for something good, work for something greater than me. I started seeing how small businesses were struggling, because I was one of them. I started to see how immigrant small businesses were struggling even harder. And I started to see, how can we use our voices to help the local small business community? So this is something that COVID really taught me, that our voice has power. It has a lot of power. And that it may start small and shaky, right? We may start sharing on our socials or, with the people next to us. But then, it's going to grow. And it did for me. I started getting invited to all these panels because people wanted to, hear my opinion about the small business and the local economy. And I scared myself because I actually had something to say and people were listening. To me, that was I couldn't believe it. Like, who's going to listen to this Mexican chick who's crazy and has ADHD and has all of these ideas? But they were. And it was humbling and it was exciting and it was actually working because people were listening and people were actually changing things in order to help the community. So it starts small and shaky, but then it can roar, right? Like it roars by, I learned that I could talk to my local MPs and my city councilors and that they would listen. To me, again, as an immigrant, that was huge because that doesn't really happen in my country. Then I started to realize that the media are also listening and we can have a bigger voice if we use them as well. Decision makers can also make an impact, but it's just a matter of us speaking up and providing solution-based commentary. And because of that, I realized, okay, so what is the community that I'm most fond of? And it's the immigrant community, obviously, because that's where, it's very dear and near to my heart. So I decided to create an academy to help immigrants not make the same mistakes that I did or that my dad did when we were starting our businesses. And I started to really roar in what I believed in. Became a TEDx speaker on immigrant entrepreneurs, and then helping a lot of organizations with their programming to help not just necessarily immigrant entrepreneurs, but underrepresented entrepreneurs, the Black entrepreneurship community, the Indigenous community, the immigrant community, impact hubs. So very purpose-driven organizations. And the last thing, in my ADHD journey of creation through business, I decided to actually just formalize a non-for-profit organization, which is Immigrant Entrepreneur Canada. It happened in March. I'm still building the plane as I'm taking off. But the idea is to create a national program to create those people that are new to Canada in their journeys as entrepreneur and not make the same mistakes that I did and connect them faster with their local community and make sure that they're able to feel welcome, flourish, and thrive. The same way I wish I would have had the opportunity and my dad when we were starting out in Canada. Thank you. How to do that? Because these are like crazy big dreams, right? But it all starts with a dream. It started with, in January, with asking women to get together and just like women entrepreneurs to get together and connect. Very, very much like CreativeMornings, actually. Just like put a bunch of people with the same like-minded ideas and see what happens. And it went from 7 people in January to, I think our last one, we had close to 100 people. So it's just, every month it just keeps growing and growing and growing. And I decided to do it with women specifically at the beginning, just because, I don't know, obviously I'm a woman and it's an easier connection, but the plan is to expand it, regardless of gender, regardless of industries, and to launch these groups across Canada and then programming. But anyways, again, super big dreams, but it all starts with 7 women, right? It started with 7 women who said yes, and who started getting behind this. And then, the sky is the limit. So I'm super excited about this. So I guess I want to leave you with a few learnings. And I want to ask you, how can you work hard? I know that everybody works hard, but can you recognize those around you that have influence? And can you speak up and self-advocate for something that you truly believe in? Is there anybody that you can point that has the influence to get you where you need to go? But then I would also encourage you to, hey, how can you collaborate with those around you that have influence and then draw on each other's ideas to create something even bigger and better that doesn't just benefit you individually, but could potentially benefit the wider community where you live. And then another question that I want to, see it is, are there any hard decisions that you've been stalling because it's scary, making those hard decisions is scary, but can you make that hard decision of shedding something that is dragging you right now, that is not serving you, so that you can make space and room to create something better, something bigger? So is there a hard decision that you need to make right now that is scary, but it might be scary right now, but it might be the best decision of your life to create that space down the road? And then how can you use your voice? How can you use your voice, even if it shakes, because it is going to shake, especially at the beginning. But how can you use your voice to share your message, to advocate for others, and to create something good? And I guess, if you would have told that little girl next to Mickey that I would be here, oh my God, CreativeMornings, that I would be here sharing this and talking to all you beautiful people, I would have said you guys are crazy. But I'm so privileged that I'm here. I'm so privileged that you guys are willing to listen. And I'm very proud of myself, and I'm very grateful to my parents, because if it wasn't for them and their decision, there's no way I would be standing here. And I guess at the end of the day, for whatever idea that you have, so why don't you? Thank you, guys. Thank you very much.
Look at that, right under 30 minutes. Awesome job. Thank you so much, Karla, for sharing your story, for giving us a lot of little gems on how we can build into our ideas and everything. We do have time for questions. If you have any questions, for those of you that are entrepreneurs, this is a great opportunity to ask somebody that's been through it and through it again. I'll run the mic around, but as you're thinking of a question, I've got one for you. How do you maintain your energy throughout from inception of an idea? You know, when you first get that idea, you're super excited about it. And then you start to put pen to paper and then you start to realize the barriers or the work that it takes. So how do you maintain that energy from inception of idea to execution and then maintaining it or fostering it once it's out there?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I am addicted to the thrill of the start. Right. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs, you know, it's the shiny object syndrome. So I love the start. I love the I don't know how the hell I'm going to do it part. That drives me, right? Like the solving the problem and that finding those puzzle pieces. How do I maintain my energy? I think when the problem hasn't been solved, it's almost like a dopamine hit for me. And funny enough, when I've launched the business and it's in operations and whatnot, to me and I have to work on this because it's also not healthy. That's when I lose interest, and that's when I went, ego driven and made bad decisions, right? When you get bored and whatnot. So how do I maintain my energy? Again, my energy at the beginning is super high. Once it happens and once it's in operations, I lose the steam. It's communicating with people, like-minded people, right? Like, as I mentioned, entrepreneurship is contagious. So having a community where I could draw that energy when I am depleted of that energy, I think that interaction of energy is very important for me because I feed off of that energy, right? And sometimes when you're working on your own, it's hard to maintain that energy and it's hard to keep it up. So a lot of networking, or not even networking, a lot of community. And that's why for me, it was very important to build that community that didn't exist. I did it in part for selfish reasons. But yeah, for me, it's very important, that community and that exchange of energy.
So who checked your ego, or what checked your ego and like made you realize that you really needed to change or you needed to adapt to the situation?
That's a great question. And I think I missed this part. What checked my ego is when I opened that business, ego driven. And within a week of opening the doors of that business, I realized that I had made the biggest mistake of my life. That I wasn't passionate as I thought I was going to be, that I hated it. Like I really didn't enjoy it. I thought it was going to be fun. And it was like, famous last words. How hard can this be? Right? That was my ego talking. And then I invested my money, my mom's money, my dad's money, my brother's money, to realize a week after I opened the doors, shit, I hate this. Like, I hate this. So I think that was the biggest check. But because there was such a huge commitment that I had to my parents' retirement, I kept it going, but I hated every single minute of it. And then that's when I realized, fuck, my decision was ego driven. So it was the biggest mistake of my life, but also the biggest learning, where I've learned the most. Yeah, but they say that from the biggest failures, sometimes, those are the biggest learnings. So I had to learn the hard way.
You talked about bringing people in who you think have influence to help you on your journey. Can you talk about, what is the right time, or, how much do you feel like you need to conceptualize before you start bringing people in? Is there a timing around that?
That's a great question. I think for the first two examples that I gave, it was almost too late, right? The first one, I had not, gone into second year. And then on the second example, my business was not doing well. So it was out of desperation, right? I think that, and right now, as I'm building this, non-for-profit organization, Great question, because I am doing it from the beginning, before I need them, right? So I'm recognizing the people of influence to kind of get them excited about what we're doing, what we're building, and kind of plant the seeds for when I know I'm going to need them in the future. But I think if I could do it all over again, I would start doing it from before you need them. You know, it's like, when do you need to start networking? Well, before you really need the network, right? And it's like all of that stuff. So it's like, who are the people of influence of whatever your decision is, or whatever, you know, your dream is, or whatever you're working on? Who could potentially be those people with influence that could help you down the road? So if I could do it all over again, that's how I would plan it.
If 5 years from now, if you're to look back and Immigrant Entrepreneur Canada is a success, what does that look like, and how can we help you get there?
Oh my God, I love this question. Thank you. So 5 years from now, one of the main issues for any entrepreneur, but particularly for immigrant entrepreneurs, is access to funding. As immigrants, we come to Canada and our credit history is zero, right? Regardless if you're 50 or 18, we have to build it up from scratch. So if we want to open businesses and get financing, it's near impossible to do it. So my vision is to be able to have a fund so that we are able to fund small business owners, immigrant entrepreneurs. Another vision that I have is to create programming, to create programming across Canada so that immigrant entrepreneurs can, if you've opened a business, or if you've ever looked into what does it take to open a business, it's very confusing. There's like 1,000 windows on your browser open trying to find the right information. And if English is not your first language, if you don't know how things work here, it's even harder. So I want to create a portal where immigrant entrepreneurs don't have to open those 1,000 browsers, that they can get all the information there. So access to finance, easy access to information, and programming as well, and access to networks too. So how can you guys help? Amazing question, but I don't know at the time. But if there are any influential people that you may know that might help us get closer to that dream, I would love an introduction.
Awesome. Amazing. Such a great and beautiful. This was very beautiful work. I'm curious about the tension you might have felt around your social profile in some of the darker days. Because I have a quandary around our mental health and the way we're nurturing stories as a society. And I think there's some things we're not managing well together. And so I'm curious what that was like for you, because you put it up on the slide and I'm like, what could we be doing differently there to actually embrace the full journey? So I think we want to hear the good stories, and then we want to. When I was an entrepreneur, I felt like I wanted to hide sometimes.
Yeah, a great question too. I was actually very open, like during my darker times, and I'm gonna call darker times, let's say COVID, right? My darker times during COVID, I was actually very open, and I said, if I don't talk about this as a business owner, you know, I'm not going to glamorize it. I'm not going to say, yeah, I'm hustling, right? When that's not my reality. So in my socials, on LinkedIn, I didn't care, right? I didn't care. I was putting, because I'm also a mom, and I was working from home, and my kids were doing, you know, their studies from home. So I remember there was a post that got a lot of comments of my kitchen, a total mess. My hair, like in a messy bun. My kids in the background with like their laptops, like not understanding stuff. And then me trying to work as well and saying, this is the reality. If you're a woman entrepreneur and you're a mom, this is the reality right now. I'm going crazy. You saw the picture that I said, you know, I'm deflated. I'm feeling all of these feelings, but if my business goes down, at least it goes down doing something good. I was talking about mental health a lot. And even when I closed the business, I actually put a post about how deflating it was to close a business and not have the support and community that you can normally get if you're starting a business. Right? And I started pushing for more to normalize it and to provide support for those business owners that are closing businesses. So, and again, I'm just like the annoying squeaky wheel, because not a lot of people talk about this. So I just started sometimes oversharing if you want. But just to say, no, like, you know, even like I've been in business for a long time. I wasn't successful on this one. And I'm ingrained in the business community, and I couldn't find the support. I couldn't find the how do you close a business properly. I couldn't find it, and I even wrote an Ottawa Citizen column about this. Like, it's not fair that all of our funding goes to starting businesses and tech startups and scale. But the reality is that a big chunk of business owners don't make it. So what happens to that support? What happens to those entrepreneurs? So I became very open about that, because I think that we all need to talk about the realities of the ups and the downs. But it's just, you know, it's me, the squeaky wheel. Yeah, but great question.
We have time for one more question. What does that support look like when a business is closing down?
Yeah, what I wish I would have gotten. So everybody assumes that when you close a business, you go bankrupt, right? That's not true. Like, you have options. Finding those options is near impossible, because I thought that the only way that I could get information was to go to a bankruptcy agency. And then they were like, no, like, don't declare bankruptcy. I'm like, okay, so then what do I do? Well, just talk to your advisors. I'm like, advisors? Like, I talked to my accountant and they were like, well, seek counsel. And I talked to a lawyer, well, seek counsel. Like, there is nobody actually helping you navigate when you have to, you know, turn the lights off. I had business loans. So what happens if I'm gonna close my business and I'm not gonna be able to pay the remainder of my business loan? What are the implications? So there is no service, there is no organization that takes you to the hand, because it's already a very shameful, personally, it's very shameful to go through a closure and to admit that you didn't do it. It's a big hit on your ego. It's very shameful, but the reality is that people go through this all the time, but everybody goes through it alone. So it would look like actually having, just like you have business coaches and business advisors to start and grow a business. I think it would be very beneficial to have business support for when you have to fold a business, how to do it properly without burning bridges.
Thank you.